Senator McKenzie.
Mr Acting Deputy President, and I'm very proud to rise and speak to the government's response to the Senate Committee of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations References Committee, a report into teaching and learning, maximising our investment in schools. And I was one of the senators with Senator Back and others who actually contributed to this report. And as Senator Back's contribution noted, this was not a blue sky report. It was a report where we spoke to principals, where we spoke to teachers and researchers, and actually got to the very heart of what makes a difference to teaching and learning. And it was actually on the back of the committee's trip to China in the wake of the PISA results, and particularly the Shanghai school systems results, that the committee wanted to understand more fully how China was getting the results they were within those international tests, and whether there were any lessons for us to learn, particularly given the prior government's fixation on ensuring we were in the top 5 of PISA results. And Senator O'Neill, as an educator through you, Chair, I'm sure you'd appreciate that international tests are not a good education barometer, if you like, to actually understand the quality of an education that goes on within classrooms and within schools and within communities. And yet that's what the former Labor government chose to hold up as the measurement of a quality education through their so-called Gonski reforms. And while Senator O'Neill rails in some faux outrage that this report was handed down in May 2013 to the former Labor Greens government, that our government is actually responding, that hers didn't. And this is despite the great Gonski report was handed down, I think, December 2010, and yet here we were running around the country, trapping after premier in great haste in September 2013 in an effort to actually realise the principles that Gonski underlined. And we didn't end up with the model that Gonski wanted. The government that actually delivered a national, needs-based school funding model that was sector-blind was not the Gillard government, was not the Labor Greens government, but was Christopher Pyne and the Abbott government that delivered that. And no matter how you want to paint it, it's actually the facts, and the department actually confirmed that fact for the committee in a hearing over the recent months, that the sector-blind, needs-based national funding model was delivered by the coalition government, not by the former government. Indeed, there's actually an increased investment in school funding from the Commonwealth going forward over the forward estimates. And so I just want to put that on the record for all those fabulous Australians listening to the Senate this afternoon. When I go to the government's response, I realise why the government has decided to note so many of the recommendations. And it is because so many of our recommendations actually understood the fact that state governments are actually responsible for the delivery of school education, and many of the recommendations we made went to the heart of that matter. And so the issues we've raised have actually been referred to the appropriate place for those discussions to take place. One thing we did realise in talking to principals and teachers and students about what makes excellent teaching and learning is that it is about, and all the research bears this out, and I go to Senator O'Neill's contribution again, as if it doesn't matter, as if the teacher in the classroom and our pedagogy within that space doesn't make a difference to teaching and learning, or isn't the most important thing that makes a difference to student outcomes, but it is. It absolutely is. And what our government is committed to doing is ensuring that we put taxpayers' dollars where it's going to make the biggest difference for our students. Not for the AEU, not for the NTEU, for Australian students who attend state schools, who attend Catholic schools and who attend private independent schools. So The setting up of the Teacher Education Ministerial Advisory Group, or TMAG, was actually fundamental in addressing many of the recommendations we raised in this report, because it actually went to the heart of, well, what does make a great teacher? What is the role of the Deans of Education across this country in ensuring our teacher training programs turn out the kind of graduates that aren't going to leave the profession after 5 years, that are going to understand what is required to be a great teacher, how to actually deliver lessons in a way that engages young Australians, but also ensures they actually learn something. That, you know, a good science lesson does not mean you get to watch Mythbusters 24/7. You actually have to understand the principles of scientific teaching, etc. And so it's pedagogical approaches that work. It's also ensuring that our teachers graduate with core subject knowledge, that they are experts in the classrooms. Yes, they facilitate students to understand the content within a certain context, but they have to be the experts in the room. You can't leave this one to Wikipedia. And professional experience, and we understand that is an ongoing conversation and learning for teachers themselves and learning communities. And that is something our government has very much understood. And that's why TMAG report is in, and looking forward to the government's response to that and moving forward over coming years on how we're actually going to ensure that every Australian student has a quality Australian teaching in their classrooms and therefore maximises their opportunity to learn. I think another great initiative of the government around teaching and learning is the appointment of Professor John Hattie to AITSL, widely respected within the profession, very, very focused on ensuring that there is evidence behind what we do in a classroom, that it's really going to make a difference for students, not just middle-class white kids, that it actually, everything we do in a classroom is based on research and evidence, and I think that's going to be very, very powerful and transformative for teaching. One of the recommendations we made was about the development of online resources, and that is exactly one of the key components of AITSL's work. That I think gathering those online resources that teachers can use to better deliver in their classrooms. One of the other responses or recommendations that we made was about closing the gap. And I'd like to recognise the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Nigel Scullion, who is in the chamber today, on his own initiatives to ensure, whilst the figures on closing the gap of educational attainment for Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia is not where we want it to be, that his very practical and pragmatic approach to solving this problem in terms of his officers that work in community with families to ensure young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are heading into the schools is actually going to be the first step to ensuring that we do close the gap. You've got to get them in the door. You've got to get them in the door. I think another particular focus, I think, of Senator Back and I, because we are both mathematically and scientifically bent, was to focus on STEM, and Senator Collins, fabulous, no unity ticket there, that we all are focused on the importance of STEM subjects in the curriculum, ensuring that those teachers that are experienced and expert in the teaching of STEM are available right across the school system is so important, and we made a variety of recommendations to that effect. And that's why I'm very, very proud of our government's not only response to the report, but the policy initiatives that we're actually implementing right now through our competitiveness agenda, and indeed Minister Pyne's own personal commitment to ensuring that mathematics and science and indeed technology is a key focus of our government and our education policy going forward. I commend the report. I enjoyed working with Senator Back on this report, and indeed, Senator Marshall, we do miss you. And the bipartisan approach that the former committee had to all things education. But indeed, It was a great report, and I'm very, very proud of a government that's putting students first when it comes to teaching and learning. We're investing taxpayers' money wisely to give that effect, and I look forward to the recommendations of this report bearing fruit in the decades ahead.
Thank you, Senator McKenzie.